Gord's Poetry Show, number 11. Didn't think we'd get this far. It's been a long, strange trip, as the Grateful Dead would say. That's not the Dead playing right now, by the way. But we are going to continue with more American poetic culture. Starting off with something I didn't quite get to the last time. Allen Ginsberg. The same year he wrote his famous poem Howl, he wrote another poem, A Supermarket in California. What thoughts I have of you tonight, Walt Whitman, for I walked down the side streets under the trees with a headache, self-conscious, looking at the moon. In my hungry fatigue and shopping for images, I went to the neon fruit supermarket, dreaming of your enumerations. What peaches and what penumbras, whole families shopping at night, aisles full of husbands, wives in avocados, babies in the tomatoes. And you, Garcia Lorca, what were you doing down by the watermelons? I saw you, Walt Whitman, childless, lonely old grubber, poking among the meats in the refrigerator and eyeing the grocery boys. I heard you asking questions of each. Who killed the pork chops? What price bananas? Are you my angel? I wandered in and out of the brilliant stacks of cans following you, and followed in my imagination by the store detective. We strode down the open corridors together in our solitary fancy-tasting artichokes, possessing every frozen delicacy and never passing the cashier. Where are we going, Walt Whitman? The doors close in an hour. Which way does your beard point tonight? I touch your book and dream of our odyssey in the supermarket and feel absurd. Will we walk all night through solitary streets? The trees add shade to shade. Lights out in the houses. We'll both be lonely. Will we stroll dreaming of the lost America of love past? Blue automobiles in the driveways? Home to our silent cottage? Ah, dear father, graybeard, lonely old courage teacher, what America did you have when Sharon quit poling his ferry and you got out on the smoking bank and stood watching the boat disappear on the black waters of Leith? Walking all night in the solitary streets. Very Beat Generation, that. Almost iconic of their experience. Walking at night, trying to understand their culture, the one they felt so estranged from. Frank O'Hara, another iconic 20th century American poet. These poems are from the 1950s, and as you go through them, you hear the voice of the 80s and the 90s and the post-millennium. You hear modern poetry being born. I say, not too originally, but let's not forget. Dear Frank, what a modern man. Today, oh, kangaroos, sequins, chocolate sodas, you really are beautiful. Pearls, harmonicas, jujubes, aspirins, all the stuff they've always talked about still makes a poem a surprise. These things are with us every day, even on beachheads and biers. They do have meaning. They're strong as rocks. Poem. The eager note on my door said, call me when you get in. So I quickly threw a few tangerines into my overnight bag, straightened my eyelids and shoulders, and headed straight for the door. It was autumn by the time I got around the corner. Oh, all unwilling to be either pertinent or bemused, but the leaves were brighter than grass on the sidewalk. Funny, I thought, that the lights are on this late and the hall door open. Still up at this hour? A champion Jai player like himself? Oh, fie! For shame! What a host, so zealous! And he was there in the hall, flat on a sheet of blood that ran down the stairs. I did appreciate it. There are few hosts who so thoroughly prepare to greet a guest only casually invited. And that several months ago. Autobiographia Literaria. Oh, Mr. Coleridge. When I was a child, I played by myself in a corner of the schoolyard, all alone. I hated dolls and I hated games. Animals were not friendly and birds flew away. If anyone was looking for me, I hid behind a tree and cried out, I am an orphan! And here I am, the center of all beauty, writing these poems. Imagine! Homosexuality. 1954. Still a very serious subject in those days. So we are taking off our masks, are we? And keeping our mouths shut? As if we'd been pierced by a glance. The song of an old cow is not more full of judgment than the vapors which escape one's soul when one is sick. So I pull the shadows around me like a puff and crinkle my eyes as if at the most exquisite moment of a very long opera. And then we are off, without reproach and without hope that our delicate feet will touch the earth again, let alone very soon. It is the law of my own voice I shall investigate. I start like ice, my finger to my ear to my heart, that proud cur at the garbage can in the rain. It's wonderful to admire myself with complete candor, tallying up the merits of each of the latrines. 14th Street is drunken and credulous. 53rd tries to tremble but is too at rest. The good love a park, and the inept a railway station. And there are the divine ones who drag themselves up and down the lengthening shadow of an Abyssinian head in the dust, trailing their long elegant heels of hot air, trying to confuse the brave. It's a summer day, and I want to be wanted more than anything in the world. Wanting to be wanted. How plaintive that sounds. Plaintive, sad, touching. Right next to Frank O'Hara in this fine anthology, 20th Century American Poetry, there is John Ashbery. And I'm charmed by how they seem next to each other. I'd never really associated them before. Ashbery seems so much more like the grandson of Wallace Stevens than anyone else. But listen to some of these. These are early Ashbery, 81, 84. Paradoxes and oxymorons. This poem is concerned with language on a very plain level. Look at it talking to you. You look out a window or pretend to fidget. You have it, but you don't have it. You miss it. It misses you. You miss each other. The poem is sad because it wants to be yours and cannot be. What's a plane level? It is that and other things, bringing a system of them into play. Play? Well, actually, yes. But I consider play to be a deeper outside thing, a dreamed role pattern, as in the division of grace these long August days, without proof, open-ended, and before you know it, it gets lost in the steam and chatter of typewriters. It has been played once more. I think you exist only to tease me into doing it on your level, and then you aren't there, or have adopted a different attitude. And the poem has set me softly down beside you. The poem is you. Just walking around. What name do I have for you? Certainly there is no name for you in the sense that the stars have names that somehow fit them. Just walking around, an object of curiosity to some, but you are too preoccupied by the secret smudge in the back of your soul to say much and wander around, smiling to yourself and others. It gets to be kind of lonely, but at the same time off-putting, counterproductive, as you realize once again that the longest way is the most efficient way, the one that looped among islands, and you always seem to be traveling in a circle. And now that the end is near, the segments of the trip swing open like an orange. There is light in there, and mystery, and food. Come see it. Come not for me, but it. But if I am still there, grant that we may see each other. Carl Sandburg. Remember him from school days? They will say, of my city, the worst that men will ever say is this: you took little children away from the sun and the dew, and the glimmers that played in the grass under the great sky, and the reckless rain. You put them between walls to work, broken and smothered, for bread and wages, to eat dust in their throats, and die empty-hearted for a little handful of pay on a few Saturday nights. Fish crier. I know a Jew fish crier down on Maxwell Street with a voice like a north wind blowing over corn stubble in January. He dangles herring before prospective customers, evincing a joy identical with that of Pavlova dancing. His face is that of a man terribly glad to be selling fish, terribly glad that God made fish, and customers to whom he may call his wares from a pushcart. Billy Collins. We've read some Billy Collins before. Former poet laureate and quite a famous poet these days. Here's an early book of his, 1981, Questions About Angels. American Sonnet. We do not speak like Petrarch, or wear a hat like Spenser, and it is not 14 lines like furrows in a small, carefully ploughed field, but the picture postcard, a poem on vacation that forces us to sing our songs in little rooms or pour our sentiments into measuring cups. We write on the back of a waterfall or lake, adding to the view a caption as conventional as an Elizabethan woman's heliocentric eyes. We locate an adjective for the weather. We announce that we are having a wonderful time. We express the wish that you were here and hide the wish that we were where you are, walking back from the mailbox, your head lowered as you read and turn the thin message in your hands. A slice of this place, a length of white beach, a piazza, or carved spires of a cathedral will pierce the familiar place where you remain, and you will toss on the table this irreversible display, a few square inches of where we have strayed, and a compression of what we feel. Reading myself to sleep. The house is all in darkness, except for this corner bedroom, where the lighthouse of a table lamp is guiding my eyes through the narrow channels of print. And the only movement in the night is the slight swirl of curtains, the easy lift and fall of my breathing, and the flap of pages as they turn in the wind of my hand. Is there a more gentle way to go into the night than to follow an endless rope of sentences, and then to slip drowsily under the surface of a page into the first tentative flicker of a dream, passing out of the bright precincts of attention like cigarette smoke passing through a window screen? All late readers know the sinking feeling of falling into the liquid of sleep, and then rising again to the call of a voice that you are holding in your hands, as if pulled from the sea back into a boat, where a discussion is raging on some subject or other, on Patagonia, or thoroughbreds, or the nature of war. Is there a better method of departure by night than this quiet bon voyage with an open book, the sole companion who has come to see you off, to wave you into the dark waters beyond language? I can hear the rush and sweep of fallen leaves where the world lies unconscious, and I can feel myself dissolving, drifting into a story that will never be written, letting the book slip to the floor, where I will find it in the morning when I surface, wet and streaked with daylight. Thank you, Billy. Recent book from an American poet, Brian Culhane, The King's Question, from which we have sampled before, most enjoyably, I might add, Brian. Angelus Novus. Back from the catastrophe of the paradisal past, this steady crescendo of wind, this continuous wind, the act of knowing is a single gesture, present, past, future, merely floating logs on either side of a wind-cleft river, as Wittgenstein says. Metaphor for past events slipping by the blue book's shore. Wind-cleft, too poetic for his German, his flowing past, northern, solitary, laconic, flows a chastening wind. Or take that other man, Walter Benjamin, whose past one rainy night in 1940 became a suicide's breathless wind, cleaving time into two disparate streams, where past and aggrieved future flow unevenly toward, and no wind relieves his mind of a tortured backward look. Past a conspicuous chain of events, though the stale wind of lips gone blue suggests the apothegm's purity is past helping. The grand amalgamating fugues of reason, wind from a boxcar. Wittgenstein was fond of spending his past in Norwegian huts, where waves scissor before wind. He'd write thoughts on slips of paper. Like the past, they accumulated in a shoebox. Like Clee's angel facing wind, he watched them drift. Call them things from the past, sometimes say from the past. Such subtlety was once more and taste the wind. Wittgenstein thought long and hard about the image of time past. There was no pleasure in it, a grammar of wave and wind. He studied bad American movies from the front row. The past rose like a cathedral's magnified St. Francis preaching to wind-stunned birds. Yet, when the end languidly passed, his blurred eyes in the projector's false light. A wind goes through all things, and had we eidetic recall, the past would contain all instants, layered in a box. Benjamin's wind litters Viennese squares. The time for paradise is past. Time, surely. Only birds ask. What is time in terms of wind? James Tate, American surrealist storyteller, has become something of a favorite on PoetryShow. And tonight, this afternoon, this evening, this morning, wherever you happen to be in the universe watching this, another one from this, the Return to the City of White Donkeys. The Loon. A loon woke me this morning. It was like waking up in another world. I had no idea what was expected of me. I waited for instructions. Someone called and asked me if I wanted a free trip to Florida. I said, sure. Can I go today? A man in a uniform picked me up in a limousine, and the next thing I know, I'm being chased by an alligator across a parking lot. A crowd gathers and cheers me on. Of course, none of this really happened. I'm still sleeping. I don't want to go to work. I want to know what the loon is saying. It sounds like ecstasy tinged with unfathomable terror. One thing is certain. At least they are not speaking of tax shelters. The phone rings. It's my boss. She says, "Where are you?" I say, "I don't know. I don't recognize my surroundings. I think I've been kidnapped." If they make demands of you, don't give in. That's my professional advice. Just then, the loon let out a tremendous looping, soaring, swirling, quadruple whoop. "My God, are you all right?" my boss said. In case we do not meet again, I want you to know that I've always loved you, Agnes, I said. What? She said. What are you saying? Goodbye, my darling. Try to remember me as your ever loyal servant, I said. Did you say you loved me? She said. I said yes, and hung up. I tried to go back to sleep, but the idea of being kidnapped had me quite worked up. I looked in the mirror for signs of torture. Every time the loon cried, I screamed and contorted my face in agony. They were going to cut off my head and place it on a stake. I overheard them talking. They seemed like very reasonable men, even, one might say, likable. At least they were not talking about tax shelters. Hooray, hooray. No tax shelters on the Poetry Show? Just beautiful language. Effortlessly singing. Singing of itself. Singing to other songs across time and space. Au revoir, mes amis.